A recent study by a coalition of universities and charities reveals that strict visa conditions introduced in the UK post-Brexit significantly heighten the risk of modern slavery, exploitation of migrant workers, etc. The study has highlighted the heightened risk of modern slavery and exploitation faced by migrant workers in the United Kingdom following Brexit. The research was conducted by a coalition of top universities and charities and pinpoints specific visas as the root cause of this vulnerability. In the wake of Brexit, Britain introduced agricultural and care visas to address labour shortages. These visas come with strict conditions and time limits, inadvertently increasing the vulnerability of workers to exploitation, a phenomenon researchers term with hyper-precarity. Workers on these visas struggle with debt and wage deductions due to illegal recruitment fees and other expenses like travel, training, and accommodation. Deception by intermediaries exacerbates the situation. Migrant workers are often misled about the conditions and duration of their employment. And the study also reveals that the fear of immigration enforcement prevents these workers from reporting mistreatment, thus perpetuating the cycle of abuse. Dr. Inga Thiemann from the University of Leicester, who led the study, expressed deep concern about the high risk of labor exploitation and debt bondage under these visas. Brexit has made workers more vulnerable, that's what she said to The Guardian. She emphasized the need for policies that allow easier job transitions for these workers to reduce their vulnerability. A striking example of this predicament is a Filipino care worker who migrated under a care worker visa in 2022. He shared his ordeal of working 12-hour shifts without breaks for minimum wage, while struggling with mounting debts and unclear fees charged by agents. The worker's expectation of provided accommodation was unmet, leading to significant financial strain for him and his family. And the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, David Neal, also criticized the Home Office's approach to these visas. He stated in his foreword that the Home Office applied a visa model meant for highly skilled workers to a high-risk sector, leading to inadequate control measures. And Neil pointed out that there's only one compliance officer for every 1,600 employers licensed to sponsor migrant workers. Despite evidence of exploitation, the Home Office continues to expand the seasonal worker visa scheme. However, a spokesperson for the Home Office defended their stance, stating, "We do not tolerate illegal activity in the labor market and will always take decisive action where we believe abusive practices are taking place." Welcome to the Brexit, sir. And Brexit has also cost Scotland up to 100 million a year in lost salmon exports, as members of the Scottish Parliament heard on Thursday. Scottish salmon is the UK's largest food export, but farming companies have faced increased red tape and costs triggered by the departure from the EU in January 2020. In 2019, there were more than 53,000 tons of Scottish salmon exported to the Union, with the figure falling to 44,000 in 2023. Export values to the EU were only down 3% to £356 million because strong global demand drove up prices, but if the sector had maintained volumes at 2019 levels, then sales would have been above £430 million. That means there has been a net loss of around £75 million, or up to £100 million if the sector had grown at the rate previously expected, and that's according to a release from the industry trade body Salmon Scotland. However, the Brexit impact has been mitigated by huge growth in other markets, particularly Asia and the USA. Overall, international sales in 23 were up from 578 million to 581 million, including a 7% increase to the US and 22% to Asia. However, with salmon increasingly popular in traditionally smaller European markets, such as the Netherlands and Spain, smoother trade flow and new markets would open up the possibility of further economic growth, generating greater investment in the Scottish economy and more high-skilled Scottish jobs. Brexit impact of lost sales does not include the direct $3 million a year cost to farming companies because of the lack of an e-certification scheme. The chief executive of the trade body Salmon Scotland, that's Tavish Scott, addressed the MSPs on the Constitution, Europe, External Affairs and Culture Committee as part of their inquiry into the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, which is up for review after the general election. Talking ahead of his appearance, Scott emphasized the challenges faced by the salmon farming sector post-Brexit, stating, "Brexit red tape continues to hold back the potential of Scottish exports despite the hard work and investment put in by farmers to address the issues." He underscored the significance of the EU market, and he said, "The EU is still the most significant region for our exports, accounting for more than 60% of international sales." And Scott urged the next UK government to ease the burden on exporters so that sectors like ours can sell more Scottish produce, delivering economic growth and creating jobs here at home. Well, Brexit officially took place at 2300 on January 31st in 2020, and the UK's relationship with the EU is governed by the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. The TCA entered into force in May 21, and there's a provision in the agreement for a joint review of the implementation of the agreement 5 years after its entry into force, but that doesn't mean renegotiating. But there's another topic that ministers are dodging the scrutiny of its post-Brexit trade deals as well, a senior MP has said after the government refused to hold a substantive debate on a new agreement with Pacific nations. The Labour MP Liam Byrne, who chairs the Commons Business and Trade Committee, criticised the government's handling of the UK's accession to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the famous CPTPP, saying MPs should have had more time to debate the treaty. In a report published last month, Mr. Byrne's committee had called on the government to allow debate on a substantive motion to ratify the CPTPP. But in its response, published last week, the Department for Business and Trade said there had already been extensive debate on the subject, and the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act provided the option for resolving against ratification if MPs wanted to. And the department said, "A government commitment to guaranteed substantive debates under CRAG would fundamentally alter the nature of the scrutiny framework, undermine the royal prerogative, and remove flexibility." The committee had also called for an updated assessment of the impact of the CPTPP deal, saying Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch had resolved from the models used by her department to estimate the benefits in the published impact assessment. The impact assessment published by the department said the CPTPP agreement was expected to increase the UK's GDP by around 0.09% per year, although Ms. Badenoch said she was very skeptical of modelling and claimed it was based on very old data. The government rejected this recommendation, saying modelling only showed the direction of impacts and broad orders of magnitude rather than highly precise estimates of what will happen. It added that the department would carry out ongoing monitoring and evaluation of all its trade deals and would publish a comprehensive evaluation of CPTPP after 5 years. But Mr. Byrne said the response was conclusive proof that mechanisms for scrutinizing trade deals were no longer fit for purpose in this new age. He said, "This emerging world is full of new dilemmas and trade-offs as we now weigh the prices of trade growth against the potential price of new risks to our security. That is why MPs must be allowed to debate all those issues in the round and come to a balanced overall judgment. With CPTPP, MPs have been denied this opportunity. At the same time, the government has apparently cast aside its own analysis of the treaty's benefits. So should we just believe it's right for the UK because the government told us so? We can only conclude that ministers are dodging full and proper scrutiny. A Department for Business and Trade spokesperson said, "We have fulfilled our commitments at every stage of negotiations and given Parliament ample opportunity to scrutinise CPTPP. Our accession has been debated on a number of occasions, including during the passage of the CPTPP Act, and parliamentarians have been able to scrutinise the full treaty text since it was laid before Parliament in July 23. MPs had also the opportunity to debate the agreement at report stage last week, ahead of the conclusion of the CRAG scrutiny period," which is very funny. But nevertheless, that will not have been the last word on the glorious new trade deals, which I'm still waiting to see, by the way. I'm just saying 0.09%. The new Brexit freedom of making numerous trade deals with all over the world. Yeah, we all know that. Nevertheless, if you want to know more, the next video is right here at the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.